So we've experienced culture shock. We've experienced that sense where the two cultures collide and we feel uncomfortable. We brought out some examples here. Either it's our boyfriend or it's ourselves. And, you know, oh my God. Have you ever gone to a place and like said, this is really uncomfortable? And am I going to be able to make it? You know? Where you've really been pushed to your limits? We have lots of examples, lots in the literature. The IE students will get more than this than they ever wanted to see. But of curves. We have the U curve, which is you go into a culture, you get an immediate high, and then you sort of crash, and you hit bottom, and then you work yourself up, and you leave. We have the W curve, where you go through it a couple times. And the one I like, which is sort of the one that seems to fit my experience, is the breaking wave curve, where you're just going like this. In 10 days in Morocco, you're probably not going to have too many of those. But that's not to say that you won't have some culture shock. And I was telling Linda about a story where I was in Nicaragua. Now, I have lived many years of my life in Latin America and other places. And I was in Nicaragua for this course. And the homestay I was in was so pushed my limits for a moment. And I sat on the edge of the bed and I said, I'm going to be here for 3 weeks. Can I do this? And you know, I survived fine.
That was how we taught music.
Yeah.
What about the homestay pushed your limit?
First of all, I wasn't feeling well. I get all the migraines, and it was very hot, and I was getting a little bit of sunstroke. And the bathroom, you had to go through a person's bedroom to get to, and you only had running water for 4 hours a day, between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. Otherwise, there was a tank with water. You had to use that to flush the toilet. And it was like, I'm a very private person. So for me, that I had to go through someone's bedroom to get to the bathroom, that it was going to be a stretch in some ways, that I was 50 years old and what am I doing? And, you know, all those questions sort of came to me in that moment. And I passed through it pretty quickly, but I needed to let myself experience that moment of challenge. So, and, you know, when I think of some of the places I've lived for months in places where there weren't toilets and where privacy didn't exist. But this just hit me at this moment. So we've talked a little bit about some of the culture shock experiences in our lives. This woman is in Georgia too. I love these Georgia pictures. She is, there was a picture early on of a guy sort of looking off in space. This is his mother, and she makes wine in a tiny little village in Georgia. And she's really cool. And so she let me sample her wine. So we're going to talk a little bit about cultural frameworks. We can go to Morocco and have an incredible experience and talk to people and learn a lot. But we're going in the context of a course called Intercultural Communications. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some cultural frameworks, and you're going to do some work around these. So I wanted to introduce this. Anybody recognize this? Yep, Cole's learning styles. That's one, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine calls that the spaceship model, because it's a little complicated. But yeah, and a major piece of our experience in Morocco is going to be going through this cycle. And we're going to go through this every day in lots of little ways, and we're going to go through this in the entire trip in a big way. So right now, before we go, we're building on our experience. We're doing some thinking, some reading. We're thinking about what happened to us before and how this might happen to us. But then, you know, you walk down the street and you have an encounter, and then we'll have some debriefing sessions, and we'll tie that in with what we've been reading. Anybody familiar with this model? I know Linda's familiar with this model.
Yeah, it looks familiar.
This is Milton Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. And I have a handout for you on this. And this is one of those things that we expect everyone at SIT to understand by the time they get to the spring term. What this is about is it talks about an developmental model is the idea that when we encounter cultures that are not our own, that are different from what we experience, that the first time we may be in a place of denial. This is not different than who I am. And as we have experience, we may work through some stages here where we come to actually accept the idea that the cultures are different and that that's okay. We come to adapt to them. We come to integrate them. And so this model is a good way to think about your own experience, and it's a classic one for understanding the experience of someone who encounters other cultures. Linda, did you want to say anything about this model? I'm just putting you on the spot right
That's
now.
all right. That's all right. Out of a lot of the other approaches that look at cross-cultural awareness or cross-cultural understanding, I like this one because there's a sense of progression. It isn't either one extreme or the other. And in his original description, which I think was probably the early 90s, mid-90s, when he first put it out there, he not only talks about what happens in the different stages and has good examples, but he also talks about different training techniques or different learning tools you can use to help the people you're working with move towards the next stage. So if you're somebody who does a lot of training or teaching or cross-cultural work and you're doing program design, it's a really interesting way to sort of say, you know, these are the people who are my clients, I'm designing this program, and how do I meet each one of those people where they are as individuals and move them forward so they get the most out of it, which is probably more than you want.
And the chapter, the article is on the Moodle site. We have been given special dispensation because these readings are optional readings, and we have students who are from far away, as far away as Jordan and Tanzania, and students who are here, to post them on the Moodle site. But if you want to read his article about this, it's under the Bennett piece of the Moodle site.